Okay, welcome to the November Houseplant Academy, the art of bonsai. I think we kind of build it as the basics of bonsai, but as I got putting this presentation together, I thought it's really an art, kind of an obvious thing, but I thought it would be the appropriate way to call this particular class. This has also been something that's been requested. Last month we did orchids, which was my most requested topic to do for a class. And now we're moving into bonsai. So what I found is a lot of people are very interested in bonsai. They really want to try it out, but they're intimidated. It does seem very difficult. It seems like it might be something that's expensive and you don't want to mess it up. You know, you don't want to invest a lot of money and then have it die on you or not know what to do. So we're going to try to take away a little bit of the mystery for bonsai today. And, you know, whether you're a beginner, whether you're intermediate or advanced, hopefully you find something in this presentation that can be helpful to you. And I don't claim to know every single thing about bonsai, but hopefully I can get you started on your bonsai journey. Okay, so starting off, what is bonsai? The definition is a tree in a pot, kind of obvious. The Japanese words bon, meaning a shallow container or tray, and sai, which is a plant or planting. And it is pronounced bonsai. I know I say bonsai a lot, but the correct pronunciation is bonsai. So the history of bonsai, it's an art form that originated in China, but was further developed by the Japanese. So it's one doesn't have a monopoly on the other. They each have their own ways of approaching it, their own styles. In the 13th century, Japanese collected and potted wild trees that had been naturally dwarfed by nature. So you'll see sometimes when you go into forest or your yard or wherever there's a natural setting, sometimes little baby trees are growing and they're very small because they just don't get enough light or whatever reason, and they would collect those trees and just make them into bonsai. And they're meant to imitate the appearance of an old tree in nature. So one thing you'll notice whenever we talk about how to style these trees and pots and how to present them and display them, the main goal with all of it, pruning and wiring and maintaining and repotting, is all meant to mimic that appearance of an old tree. You want it to have the look of a tree that's progressed in nature and aged naturally. So there are three sizes of bonsai. They range from under 5 inches to about 30 inches in height. At right, we have a miniature landscape from, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but it's circa 1800. It was meant to be exported to Europe. And so this one was coming from China to Europe around 1800. And you can see a very beautiful display and setting even so long ago. So not all plants work well as bonsai, and this is probably obvious, but something that we should cover. The trunk, branches, twigs, leaves, flowers, fruits, all of it need to be in perfect proportion. Those roots need to match the size and the energy demands of the leaves up top. You have to have small leaves or leaves that can become smaller under bonsai culture. And I know one of our guests today brought her ficus. When those leaves get too big, she has to pinch them back to make them smaller. You wouldn't want to use something like an avocado tree because those leaves are humongous and they would not be appropriate for a bonsai culture. Some of the most popular ones are spruce, pine, zelkova, pomegranate, and certain species of elm and maple. And there are many others, but these are probably some common ones that you do see. So make sure that what you choose is an appropriate specimen. So you want to pick something that has attractive bark. And just looking at this bonsai that I have in this picture, it's really breathtaking, I think, the way the roots are arranged. They're buttressed just so, and they're curved, and they have a beautiful color. Um, Attractive bark, the trunk must give the illusion of maturity, even though it may not be that old. It should have girth, but remain in proportion to the entire tree. It needs to taper gradually toward the top. You don't want it to have any sort of inverse taper on that trunk. So if you're at a nursery and you're looking for some good stock to use for a bonsai, you want to look and make sure that that trunk doesn't incorrectly taper as it gets to the bottom. Good buttress rootage at the base, as you can see how those roots are all at the top and exposed, and they're kind of coming toward the edge of the container. That's what that means. And then a graceful movement as it rises to the apex. And I would certainly say this looks very graceful. So some other features to look for in plants that you choose. The branches lower down the trunk should be longest and biggest in diameter. So you're going for a balanced or symmetrical or asymmetrical look. The branches growing higher should become smaller and shorter in diameter. And it's meant to suggest the lowest branches are the oldest and the highest branches are the youngest. So they've grown for a shorter time. The ones at the bottom have grown longer. That's why they are wider. So there are five most common styles of bonsai. We're going to go over those five styles. And as I go through these, I encourage you to look at them, see which styles really call out to you for the style that you might want to grow for yourself, and notice the difference in the way that they're cared and displayed. So formal upright, informal upright, slanting, cascade, and semi-cascade. And all of these designs are based on the overall shape of the tree and how much the tree slants away from that imaginary vertical axis. And you'll see this in some pictures I'm going to share. And I wanted to share this quote. Bonsai is best experienced over many years, one moment at a time. I suppose maybe all of life is that way. And so something that I've learned in studying bonsai, just reading books and working with my own, is that it's not a one and done sort of thing. I mean, this is a plant, this is a specimen that will require interaction from you on a almost daily basis, almost like a pet. And I think that's why a lot of people become so attached to their bonsai, and there are so many stories attached to a lot of these historical bonsai that are passed through families. Okay, so the formal upright style is pretty self-explanatory in looking at this picture. This is from the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. The Shokan, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but that's how it looks to my eyes. It's really good for the beginner bonsai gardener. It's got a straight trunk and a bottom branch that is lower and extends farther from the trunk than that opposite branch. And this style represents trees that get plenty of light and don't need to compete with other trees for space. So imagining this tree in a forest in a natural setting, it's not going to be one of those lower understory trees. It's going to be one of the ones that gets the light and gets the top billing. Then we have the informal upright style, the Myogi. Best choice for beginners because it teaches the most about bonsai design, and I would agree with this. That is really the style that I have tried to emulate with my own bonsai. Not sure I'm really achieving that, but that is something that I'm working on. The trunk is upright and it's curving rather than straight, so that takes a little more care. Typically forms that zigzag pyramidal shape or an S shape, and it has branches that each curve of that shape. The major branches occur at the angles where the trunk bends, and the apex is aligned over the base of the trunk. So if you look at that picture, you'll see the very, very top of that tree is aligned with the base, but all the branches, on the sides are going in their own different alignment, not necessarily in that same formation. Makes it asymmetrically balanced. The trunk is thicker at the base and tapering as it grows. And this is a Sargent juniper. It's over 111 years old. So you can just imagine what it must have looked like when it first started and how much time and effort and care went into shaping it into what it is today and looking that good, because I wouldn't really think of it as being 111 years old. So the slanting style, the shakan, the trunk has a single more acute angle. As you can see, it's going directly to the left in this picture. It's an informal upright style. The lowest branch spreads in a direction opposite to which the tree slants, and you can kind of see that, how it's jutting off to one side. It mimics a tree that has grown in the wind, blowing mostly from one direction. So that's something to keep in mind with these different styles of bonsai that you're trying to imitate with your own, is that they didn't just pull these designs out of the air from an artist's perspective. They really are meant to mimic how those trees grow in the wild, grow in the forest, in nature. And this is one of the most common ways that you can find a tree in nature. The root system becomes well developed to support the slant of that tree. So you're going to be working on pruning those roots to make sure that they grow and thicken and develop over time. That trunk is thicker at the bottom and it tapers as it rises. And this is a lilac we're looking at right here in this slanting style. Then the cascade style, the kengai, it represents a natural tree growing down the face of an embankment. And so when they explain it like that, you can think, oh yes, I could see that in nature. I could see a tree like this growing down an embankment. It looks best in that deep round or hexagonal container. When you look at the container that this bonsai is in, you'll notice it's different than a lot of the other ones because a lot of bonsai containers are very shallow. This one's very deep to support that type of style. This is not easy to achieve in bonsai, and I wouldn't recommend it for a beginner, definitely. They're planted in those deeper pots, and the trunk's allowed to grow upright before it's being bent. And the crown of that tree usually grows where the tree is bent, as you can see. Alternating branches on that downward portion of the trunk create balance. Those strong bends are created with wire. And so I'm sure if you know anything about bonsai, if you've seen bonsai, you know that wiring is something that is a technique that is used to achieve these seemingly impossible bends and turns and twists that we get these bonsai trees into shape with. This is a blue Atlas cedar we're looking at here. Then the semi-cascade style. This is a curving trunk that does not reach the bottom of the container like the cascade style does. So you can see where that trunk doesn't reach the bottom. It's slightly elevated over the top of that container. It's meant to depict a tree hanging from the side of a cliff by the seashore or stream. The trunk bends downward beyond the rim of the container, but not below its base. And so that's something that I've kind of noticed with my own. I think my own specimen really is more of a semi-cascade style. And if you were here in person, you're looking at my bonsai. If you're not, then you'll just have to imagine with me here. So the very bottom of the one that I have does extend below the base, which indicates it needs to be trimmed. Prostrate junipers and flowering plants adapt well to both the cascade and semi-cascade. And this is a Juniperus chinensis turulosa. So when you're choosing a plant to work with, I think this one's so pretty. It's a ginkgo. Trees and shrubs are suitable. Obviously, you're not picking perennials or annuals. It's trees and shrubs, woody specimens. Dwarf plants don't always convey the same impression. So I think a lot of people sometimes think, oh, I'll just buy a dwarf shrub and use that because it's already small, but it's not going to get the same type of growth patterns as a regular full-size plant or tree. And that's what you want to go for. You want to imitate what naturally occurs in nature. And so azalea, beech, boxwood, ginkgo, maple, oak, pine, wisteria, zelkova, many different types of things to choose from. It depends on what you like personally and what you're comfortable working with and what style you want to choose. So it's best to choose common plants that are known to do well in your area. When I chose mine, I chose this juniper because I knew that it was going to do well in Georgia in this area. It wouldn't give me a major test just trying to keep it alive. I do keep mine outdoors year round. So I recommend, honestly, a lot of the tropical plants are beautiful and wonderful to care for, but I think you get a lot of satisfaction choosing something that can live outside in our climate year round. Really nice to work with. Make sure it meets all the criteria for the good bonsai that you want. So like make sure it's got the attractive bark, the small leaves, etc. Nursery stock is actually a good option because those plants have grown accustomed to being containerized already. Choosing a well-rooted plant with healthy branches, of course. And there are some tips from the Rocky Mountain Bonsai Society. They say, is it love at first sight? So I think with a lot of people, I think most plant people in general, whenever you buy a plant, you look at it and there's a, oh, that's so pretty, or oh, I love that, or oh, there's something in you that says, I'm drawn to that plant. So look for that first. You want this to make you happy. Look for that strong basal flare, and that refers to how those roots are flaring out, in a strong design, interesting trunk movement, unique branching, and then any special features that add value, such as shari. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's the barkless deadwood section on the trunk of a living tree, as you can see to the right. Just something that gives it some extra character and depth in its appearance. So choosing a plant from the wild, and I put that in quotes, it can be done, but it's a slow method with many unknown factors. When I think about this, I imagine like little tiny trees popping up in my yard and me maybe, kind of rescuing them. I don't recommend collecting from any sort of national parks or conserved areas because that is illegal. So don't get any wild ideas that you're going to go find a cute little tree growing in the forest or the park and dig that up. No, no, no. Try to choose from your own, yard. It's difficult to tell the age of a plant found in the wild, so that makes it more challenging. Also, you're supposed to collect it while it's dormant, and it's difficult to tell if your plant's healthy or not if it's dormant. That's why it's good. I say, like, the perimeter of my yard has some little baby trees growing. I can grab one of those. I know what I'm dealing with. So also, when you want to go collect one of these from the wild, you need to have all of your materials with you so that you can keep the plant healthy and alive and safe as you transport it back to your home. So you need plastic bags for that root ball, moss to pack around the roots, water to keep the plant moist because you do not want to let those roots dry out. Sometimes a crowbar is required to dislodge roots, and that seems like a little much. Permission to dig the wild plant from private property. So if somebody has some acreage and you see a cool plant that you think you might want to turn into a bonsai, you do have to get permission. You don't have just carte blanche to go out there and dig something up. Make sure you're not digging up something that's endangered. And I say it again, you cannot take plants from national parks or other conserved areas because it's illegal. Okay, plant your specimen in a protected area of your garden, and then you have to wait a full year. So you don't even get to pull it out of the wild and put it right in a pot and start having fun with it. What's recommended, and of course people do different things and you may have success with doing other things, but the recommended method is to plant it in your own garden and wait a full year, water and feed it sparingly. You don't want it to go gangbusters. And then after that year, place the plant in a training container. You're going to lightly prune the branches when planted, but wait another full year before you actually train it. So it's a very long process. The nice thing about buying something from a nursery is all that legwork has been done for you. But some people, the joy is in the experiment and the trial and error. And I say if that appeals to you, then go for it. You can also propagate bonsai. It's a very slow method, and I know because I remember when I was in horticulture classes at Gwinnett Tech and we had to propagate woody plants, it was very exciting when they would grow roots, but the time it would take for a cutting to grow into an actual tree is a very long time. And so if you're very patient, then maybe that's for you. It does have the advantage of letting you shape the plant from the beginning. These are Japanese maple cuttings at Wright, and there's a certain satisfaction in growing things from from scratch from your own cuttings. You want to plant those seedlings in the ground outside, not indoors. It really helps the trunks. And looking online, I was getting pictures for this, and a lot of people do grow their seedlings indoors under lights and in different propagation containers and have success with it. Typically, though, bonsai experts recommend doing it outside because it's going to get thicker and more and healthier. And they need to stay outdoors for approximately 2 to 5 years. Each spring, dig up the plant, prune its roots as you would as if it were potted. So it's a lot of effort and time going into that process. Make the cuttings in late spring before the buds open. Olive, willow, I can tell you willow roots so easily. Layering and grafting also works, but not really recommended for the beginner. If you want to have some fun with bonsai, I recommend purchasing one to start, and then you can kind of do your side experiments on the side. So it's very important to consider the front view of your bonsai when you're deciding how you're going to style it or take care of it or shape it. And so this is one view, and basically you want to look at it from the front, from the back, from the sides, how you want it to be viewed and presented. You're going to choose a front view, a front viewing point, and that's going to be, your guide for how you style. The lower half of the trunk should be visible without branches, which you can see in this specimen it is. And you want to make sure it has good three-dimensional development on the sides and in the back. So for example, it's kind of like decorating a Christmas tree when some people only put ornaments on the front where you can see them. You want to think about it as a Christmas tree that you're decorating all the way around. So you want it to look good all the way around, be appealing, but you're focusing on that front view. So consider the natural form of the species, and everything that I've read about bonsai, everyone says you really should, whatever plant or shrub or tree that you're going to get to make into a bonsai, you need to be familiar with what that plant looks like in nature as it ages, because that's going to inform how you style it and how you design it and how it should look. You need to be thinking about the end result of what you want that plant to look like whenever you start from the very beginning. So if that means going somewhere to view plants that are in nature that are older, or simply going online, you can go online and type in any sort of tree or shrub and, an old tree or shrub or this tree or shrub in winter or whatever, and you see how that grows. You want that to be reflected in how your bonsai is shaped. Choose the final shape and size of your bonsai, like I said from the very beginning, and make a rough sketch to use as a guide. So you don't have to be an artist. I am certainly not an artist at all, but I do find that using a guide, just like you would if you're planting a flower garden in your yard, is very helpful with bonsai. So nabari, it means cultivating the exposed roots that flare out from the base. It makes smaller trees look similar to larger trees. So I think that's really cool, especially in this picture on the right, rather, how all those trees are flared out from the base, and it makes it look like a much larger tree, even though it's very miniature, very small. So pruning, wiring, and pinching. I think most people have questions about the wiring process, and most are intimidated by that, myself included. Whenever I purchased my bonsai, I got it from a bonsai nursery that specialized in that, and I took a class and I had them help me wire it, how it should be done. Now that I've seen someone do it and had help with doing it and learned a little bit more, I'm not so intimidated. I think there's something about, here's your plan. I'm going to give you a wire. I want you to bend and twist this wood and make it, contort. It's intimidating, but just like I told someone else, if you've ever divided irises or daylilies, you chop those roots and yank and pull things apart, and everything works out. So just kind of try to remember that. You don't want to be too rough, but you have to understand that it can take more than what you think. Pinching back the long ends of foliage and the side buds to develop will make a bushier appearance, just like with your plants in the garden. That's called ramification. Pruning is less stressful than wiring. That doesn't mean wiring isn't necessary, but it is less stressful. Something important, use a concave pruner or cutter to prune. It's a special tool that will make sharp cuts without stubs, and those stubs are called collars. Now, I will say I have used my regular Felcos to just do light pruning around my juniper bonsai, but for when you're cutting into that wood and shaping that, you really do want to make sure you're using a concave cutter. Shape pruning and root pruning should be done at the same time of the year to maintain a supply and demand balance between the foliage and roots. And that really, if you think about it, makes sense. You don't want your bonsai to be top heavy. You're not going to cut a bunch of roots, really short and then leave a ton of foliage at the top. That's not going to be balanced, not going to be good for the tree. And same with the roots. You don't want a whole lot of roots and then all these little twigs sticking up. So you want some balance there. Maintenance pruning can be done really anytime, but when you do your shape and root pruning, that should be a once a year typically activity. So a deciduous tree, severely prune it back. If pruning an equal amount of root at the same time, like I mentioned, older evergreens should be pruned back gradually. Always start at the bottom, which I think a lot of times instinctively we want to start at the top because it's, wherever there's most going on, but start at the bottom. Remove those branches that are going straight up, growing inward, or one of the two that are growing opposite of each other. So if you've ever pruned a tree or a shrub outdoors growing, it's a very similar mindset and approach. You don't want those, random branches that are growing up and crazy and haywire, and you want some balance there or some asymmetry. So keep that in mind. Try not to be intimidated. So wiring a bonsai, this can be done any time of the year. Most easily done on deciduous trees in winter when they've shed their leaves. Now there are a couple specific types of wires that are meant for bonsai. And if, I'm going to tell you what they are, you can read them on the slide, annealed aluminum or copper wire. But if you're worried about not buying the proper wire, if you go somewhere like a bonsai nursery, they'll have it. But if you want to go online, just like most people do, if you type in specifically bonsai wire, that's what you're going to get. It should not bring you up to a regular wire. You don't want to try to use a regular wire because this special bonsai wire is more pliable, and you need that. Don't water the plant the day before you intend to wire it because that will cause the branches to become more flexible, which is what you want. Start wiring at the bottom of the tree and work upward. And so something that I learned is you want to anchor that wire, well, I put it in the slide too, at the base of the tree by pushing it in the soil. You can use foam pads under the wire to protect the branches. I did not do that. I was at a bonsai nursery and they did not have me do that. Maybe it depends on how delicate your species is. I didn't have to. And keep the turns around the branches or trunk about 1/4 inch apart. This is where I think it gets like a little intimidating and a little mysterious and a little like, oh my gosh, spiraling upward at a 45-degree angle, not wiring too tightly. So it sounds like a lot of things you have to think about and, make sure you're doing right. And it is, but try not to overthink it. When you really think it through, you're just, making those a 1/4 inch apart, almost like you're putting Christmas lights on a tree. You're not going to bunch those Christmas lights up, all next to each other. You're going to spread them out. You're going to spiral them at that angle. You're not going to have them going every which way. So kind of think of it like that, like you're applying Christmas lights to a tree and you want them to be displayed evenly, not too tightly. It's supposed to be kept on the plant for only one growing season, and that is something that I have not been good about. I've left mine on for 2 growing seasons. I know I'm very bad, so I need to take that out. Always start at the end of the branch and work back carefully. And I have a little video, and I'm going to see if it'll play. This is supposed to be, if it doesn't, then fine, we'll just move on. But, okay, there we go. All right, dude, why can't I hear you?
Probably a setting in the share.
Okay. Well, if we can't hear him talking, we can at least look at what he's doing. So he's shown you a before and an after, which is quite, this is not supposed to be the 11-minute one. It's supposed to be like a 1-minute one. Okay. We'll just, we'll just move on past that. Is it gonna make me go out of my?
What do you see?
I just see that. I don't see my PowerPoint anymore.
Um, try.
Okay, bear with me, everybody. This is what happens when I try to introduce some technology to my PowerPoint, and that's probably not the way. Yeah. I thought I did. I went and inserted him. All right. We'll just pretend like that didn't happen. What can I say? Okay, I should have asked Lisa before I tried to do that. Okay, so starting a bonsai in a training pot, and actually mine is still in a training pot. It needs to be repotted into a regular pot, but whatever. So bonsai begin in training pots, and they help those trees grown for bonsai transition to a shallow bonsai pot. The best type of training pot is a large diameter nursery container with drainage holes with the top cut to a depth of 8 to 10 inches. I personally think that's a lot of work to try to mess with your nursery pot and cut it up and do whatever. I think it's better just to grow or just to purchase a pack of training pots. Training pots are relatively inexpensive. If you're looking at the slide here, you can buy a whole pack or set of them for like 20 something dollars online. They're meant for bonsai training. Really no big deal, and much easier than trying to cut your own. And then grow in a coarse, well-draining soil. And I found that most bonsai soils are very similar, if not identical, to a lot of succulent soils. They have lava, bark, green zeolite, volcanic clay, perlite. Some of them can be used for both succulents and bonsai. It's not difficult to find it if you go online. In a nursery, you might find it at specific ones, but if you go online and just type in bonsai soil, you'll come up with all kinds of options. And then if you really are brave and you want to make your own, of course, there's a recipe here, but I say, purchasing some is very cost effective. It's not going to break the bank. Okay, so these are those bonsai training pots I talked about. You'll see they're in different sizes and different shapes and depths. The one that's in the center there, that's for like a typical flowering or cascading plant. The other ones are more shallow. And so these are some bonsai tools. And I will tell you, I think this is something else that probably turns people away from even purchasing or trying bonsai. They're like, oh my gosh, I have to buy the bonsai, I have to figure out how to take care of it, I gotta learn how to wire it, and then I have to buy all these expensive tools. Well, really not. If you become a kind of a bonsai connoisseur, which I know a lot of people probably are, some people are, rather, I should say, that watch this presentation, then by all means, if you get really into the hobby, if you get really particular and specific and good and comfortable with that, by all means do that. But I've had my bonsai for 2 years. I just have the concave cutter and my Felcos. Don't hate me for that. But here we have a knob cutter, a trunk splitter, the concave cutter, as I mentioned, the wire cutter. Of course, most of us have wire cutters, I think, around the house, the gym pliers, and the bonsai scissors. So it's not something you need to go out and purchase the minute you get a bonsai. It's something you can acquire over time. And always try to sterilize your tools between uses. And then fertilizer, I have used the BioGold. It's one of those pellets. It's a slow release. You can also get liquids, bonsai fertilizer, bonsai spray. A lot of people will use liquid fish emulsion in their bonsai. Very helpful. And they like mine needs to be fertilized every couple of weeks in spring and summer. I have the juniper. So traditionally they're round, oval, square, or hexagonal. And then the unglazed on the exterior is traditional for evergreens. The pot should complement and not compete with the tree. And that's something you hear all the time. You don't want it to be, you don't want to look at it and see the pot. You want to see the actual vision of that. The cascade, semi-cascade, and flowering, as I said, require deeper pots than others. The drainage holes must be covered with screening. So there's some mesh in that pot that covers that drainage hole so everything doesn't wash away. Bonsai containers should be unglazed on the inside walls and bottoms, and typically if they're sold that way, they probably will be unglazed, but you want to check. This is called a juniper raft. They refer to it as a raft because you kind of picture it like a long boat that's carrying these trees around. It's extremely shallow and creates really a nice forest scene. So repotting your bonsai, research the proper time of year for your tree to be repotted, just like you would for your houseplants or for your perennials, and for your doing things with your shrubs. Some things should be done in spring versus fall. Junipers can be repotted anytime during the growing season, which is nice. I have a juniper. Pines and most evergreens should be repotted during the late winter, which is the case for a lot of shrubs. Most deciduous trees should be potted before they leaf out in early spring. So if most branches occur to the left when viewing the tree from the front, you want to place the base of that tree slightly off center to the right to maintain that asymmetrical balance. Comb out the roots. These are all things to go through whenever you're repotting your bonsai, okay? Comb out the roots, prune any roots which have become wiry or stiff, trim the fibrous roots, and spread them out around the container, add bonsai soil, and water thoroughly. It's very honestly similar to me when I repot my tropical plants. It's not a whole lot of mystery as far as how you go about that. It's pretty much the same concept. If you're familiar with repotting houseplants and tropical plants, I think it's going to be kind of intuitive for you. So can my bonsai live in my house under a grow light? So when I attended the bonsai class and learned from people who do this for a living, they were very adamant about the bonsai living outdoors year round. And I was told that, for bonsais that come from forest trees, such as my juniper, they can live outside year round in Georgia, and they should, and they would do better that way. Except for short periods of time. So say you want to bring your bonsai in because you're having a get together and you want to put it on display, you want people to admire it because it's so cute. You can do that, but they only want you to bring it in for 2 or 3 hours. You're not meant to keep it indoors for long periods of time. As I note here, tropical bonsai are a different story. They need some indoor protection, but like the maples and the different things that grow outdoors in Georgia year round can stay outside. Something that I've done to protect mine is a lot of people display their bonsai in their gardens on tables or on shelves. I keep mine in a raised bed, which may not be the most prettiest display, but it stays so protected no matter what goes on with the weather. And I've even had the roots kind of grow into that raised bed sometimes, which keeps them protected from the cold and freezing temps, which we don't get very often here. It kind of insulates them, and that's been a really good method for me. They do need to be watered daily in summer. That was something that was stressed to me as well, is the watering, because it's an extremely shallow root system. If you look at the pot and you compare it to, your other plants, it's a shallow root system, and the bonsai soil you're using is not holding a lot of water, if any. So think about our Georgia summers and how hot it gets. If you're having an extremely brutal summer day, you might even need to water a couple times a day. Now, that's not really out of the realm of what we typically do for our perennials too. Like if we're having some crazy hot days, sometimes I go out and water my annuals or whatever a second time just to keep them from looking like they're going to die. So just you're kind of, I think, keeping that same intuitive approach for your other plants. So research the climate requirements of your tree. The junipers and pines need full sun, maples, elms, boxwoods need morning sun, etc. And just make sure you're giving that tree what it needs. You're not treating it like a house plant because it really isn't a house plant. It's a little forest that you're growing. So do I need to fertilize? Yes, during active growth periods. A bonsai specific fertilizer. People say they use diluted houseplant fertilizer. Maybe. I use the bonsai specific fertilizer because I feel more comfortable and confident knowing that it's something that's supposed to be for that plant. Preparing for winter, water less frequently, discontinue fertilization in fall, very similar to what we do with our perennials in the fall. Cease pruning or cutting branches after mid-August. And then do I keep it outside all winter? So yes, if it's something that lives outside all winter in Georgia naturally, it's not a tropical, then yes, you can. If the temp drops below 28 degrees, it needs to come in and get some protection. Something that is pointed out though, however, is that if you do bring your bonsai in from outside and bring it into some warmth to protect it, you don't want to leave it in that warmth area too long because it could cause it to go out of dormancy. And you don't want that to happen. You want it to stay in its dormancy and stay in its winter period. Just like if you brought a bulb inside and then suddenly it's warm and cozy and it starts to flower, that's not what you're trying to do. Okay, so how to display in the home garden. I really love this picture. I kind of dream of having my garden look like all those coniferous things all around. Everything's green and there's a nice wooden table with the bonsai. As I said, I'm kind of really a beginner. I'm not a master of bonsai artist, so I don't have a lot of them, and I keep mine in my raised bed because I feel more comfortable. I feel like it's protected there from extreme heat or extreme cold. But something that's stressed with bonsai is to keep your display simple, uncluttered, where you can really appreciate the details of your tree. Make sure the front faces the viewers. If you put it indoors, you want it to be on a simple stand or table. And this is just in keeping with the different cultures, the Asian culture's way of displaying and keeping true to the art form. So I wanted to share a little bit about Goshin, one of the most famous bonsai in the world. So this man, started this famous bonsai over 70 years ago when he cut the top off a mature juniper tree and planted it in a pot. And I can't imagine just going out and chopping something off a mature tree, putting it in a pot, and having it just flourish. But for the next 20 years, he added 10 more trees, one to represent each of his 10 grandchildren. And he called this miniature forest Goshin, which means protector of the spirit in Japanese. He lived and worked in Southern California and was known to use native trees like California junipers and coast live oaks rather than the traditional Asian species. So he was really well known for that. He was really a trailblazer with bonsai as far as his approach. And he mentored students around the world. And because of him, a lot of new bonsai clubs started in Australia and South Africa and other places. And he actually got a lot of criticism for doing this, for using the different types of plants and for spreading bonsai culture so widely. And he replied, "There are no borders in bonsai. The dove of peace flies to palace as to humble house, to young as to old, to rich and poor." I thought that was really nice because I feel like it kind of applies to all plants, really. I feel like let's bring everybody together. Okay, so here's his plant in 1963, and here it was in the early 1970s. And then there it was in 1987. And then there it was in 1994. So it's amazing, what just a little bit of planting could do in just a little bit of, well, not a little bit of a lot of time, I guess, and care over the decades. And this is the Hiroshima peace tree. It's a Yamaki pine that survived the Hiroshima bombing, and it was cared for by 5 generations of Yamakis. It was later gifted to the U.S. by Japan on the bicentennial of the Hiroshima bombing as a symbol of peace, forgiveness, and reconciliation. And both of these displays are at the U.S. National Arboretum in Washington, D.C. And then here is the last slide. Now this is a video, but I'm not gonna dare it and try to press the button. I swear I embedded it, but you know what? Let's just not. Well, it's the last slide, so maybe we will. Let's see if it blows up. Okay, and there's no speaking. It's just meant to show you the details of this. So it survived Hiroshima, and it's extremely, extremely old and hardy and beautiful. So that would be the end of my presentation. And if you guys have any questions, please share. If any questions have popped up in the chat. Lisa can let me know what those are. If anybody here in the audience has any questions for me, you can fire away. Yes.
Can we get a copy of this?
Yeah, I will be sending out a copy of that via email next week. So
We need to give you our email.
yes, so I have all of your, now actually, if you registered, did you register? Okay, so if you registered, I should have your email address, unless you registered and didn't give the email address. Some people do that because they don't want to be contacted at all, which I get. But if you do want a copy, if I have your email, it'll be going out to everybody who's registered, so you'll have that. Any other questions, comments, criticisms? Yes.
Visited the bonsai factory, as it were, out the monastery. east of town.
No, I have
I
not.
mean, I've heard that you don't like the bonsai, you'll like their cookies.
Oh, okay.
Might be worth a drive.
Okay. So we had someone from I know people online can't hear what the audience here is saying, but we had somebody mention there was a monastery where?
It's in Conyers.
In Conyers, okay.
Monastery of the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
Okay.
that's it.
Monastery there that has a lot of bonsai, so that's something to keep in mind. Yes.
Keep your bonsai in the raised garden.
Mm-hmm.
But yet I was under the impression most of these like the shallow soil.
Yes. So my bonsai, and maybe I gave the wrong impression when I said that. So we had a person ask about me keeping it in a raised bed. I don't mean that I plant it in a raised bed. I mean it's in its little bonsai pot, and I just set that pot in the raised bed, on the raised bed. So it's planted in its bonsai pot. It's just sitting on that soil. So if we're going to get some weather that I'm a little concerned about, or if it's extremely hot, I can kind of move it behind the flowers to give it a little bit of protection. That's why I do that.
There's a few questions online.
Okay.
Do you have a list of plants, trees, shrubs that would be suitable for use that you could provide?
Yep, so a list of plants and different shrubs and trees that we could use that would be suitable for Georgia. Yes, I could send that out with my presentation. I did, I think, note some of those in the presentation though, like really anything that grows well in Georgia should do well for you. Like this, I have a juniper myself, maples. I actually have a Japanese maple that I'm about to turn into a bonsai, crossing fingers. Anything that's hardy to our area, you're going to have a better shot with, because if you keep it outdoors, it's already acclimated to this environment. But I can certainly include a list more specifically.
There's a couple others. Can you just use succulent soil instead of bonsai soil?
So someone asked if you can just use succulent soil instead of bonsai soil. My only issue is when I've purchased succulent soil, sometimes there's actual, for lack of a better word, dirt or soil in it. It's not just rocky. The bonsai soil that's sold doesn't have any actual, for lack of a better word, brown dirt. It's all just like pebbly. So I would recommend no, just for that reason, just because you want it to be well draining, and maybe, if you would like to do that, then you technically can. When I was at the bonsai nursery, they did not do that, which made me feel kind of iffy about it. So really, it's user choice.
Good bonsai nurseries to shop.
Okay, so I know I don't typically see them like at the big box stores. I will see them around here in some of the more local nurseries like Pike, but one that I do have some experience with is called Plant City Bonsai, which is where I got mine. I took my class a couple years ago. It's in Claremont, which I think is really considered Gainesville. Anyway, it's like an hour. I think it was like actually 45 minutes for me to drive, so it was not that far, and it was worth it. I mean, the people who run this nursery, that's all they do is bonsai, and the specimens you will see there will just knock your socks off. I mean, just even just for the eye candy go, and any sort of tools or pots or just different specimens, they have it. The people to ask them questions, they've been doing this for so many decades. Great place to go. I recommend it.
Question: is it best to pot plants in the spring?
Well, it depends on what your plant is, but yes, typically most of these, they follow the late winter, early spring rule before things bud out or leaf out and things get warm. That really is a good time to do your potting and do your shape pruning and your root pruning as well.
That's all the questions that I have.
Okay, so if no one has any more questions, that concludes the online presentation. And then people who are actually here in person, I don't really have, I don't have bonsais to give you or anything, but I do have my bonsai here that you're welcome to pass around or pass the card around. You can take a look at the wiring. If you're considering getting a bonsai or possibly wiring your bonsai in the future, you can look at mine and look at how it's done and get some tips, maybe feel a little bit better, or maybe, I don't know, feel worse. I don't know, depending on how you think, and just kind of look at the style and kind of go from there. So with that, we can end. Any question? Oh, sorry. With that, we can end the presentation, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.